Good morning, and thank you for tuning into the Home and Finance Show. I'm Diana Rice Wilkerson, lender with Fairway Independent Mortgage, and joining me is my co-host.
And good morning, I'm Janice Bradley with JB Real Estate Consultants.
We are your seasoned, trusted advisors committed to personally navigating you through the home buying and home lending process. The show is designed to provide you with current and relevant information about different aspects of home buying, home selling, and lending, so that you're knowledgeable when making decisions for you and your family. You can also hear us on Saturdays on Radio 1, 1310 AM, 92.7 and 95.1 FM. That said, if you're in the market to buy, build, or refinance, we'd love to represent you. You may reach us at the contact information below. Now on with the show. Good morning, Janice
Good morning,
Bradley.
Diana Rice Wilkerson. And good morning, guest.
Good morning.
We have an exciting show this morning, and we can't wait to share all this information with you. We know people always have some questions and concerns about possible bankruptcy, or if you're ever in a situation where you just don't know what to do. Well, we've got the expert here. So why don't we just do this, take a minute, and just let our guest introduce herself. At least I will say welcome, Flora.
Thank you for having me, ladies. This is a wonderful opportunity. My name is Flora Owolabi. I am a bankruptcy attorney here in the state of Indiana. And I have been practicing now for about 14, 15 years, close to that.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Wow.
Fantastic. So share with us, how did you decide to make bankruptcy your primary goal, or your interest?
Well, I have a passion for helping people.
Okay.
So the areas of law kind of lend to that.
Yes.
And also just finances are just a very important part of life for just all Americans. So that's how I kind of got into it. It's a great area. It was my first job out of law school as an attorney. So.
I love it.
Okay.
I love it.
Okay.
And I think when it comes to bankruptcy, there are a lot of myths out there. Mm-hmm. Folks have a lot of the wrong ideas, maybe.
That's correct.
They think that it's probably one of the worst things that you can do. And so talk to us about, just what has been your experience when it comes to talking to people who kind of overwhelmed with debt, and maybe even when you're suggesting bankruptcy or they're exploring that idea, just their reactions and how you handle some of their fears and objections.
Yes, it's an area that people are not as comfortable with because, they hear a lot of, well, if I file bankruptcy, I can't buy a house. I can't buy a car. I lose everything. If I have a house, maybe I'm going to lose it through the bankruptcy or lose a car. And it's always good to kind of talk them off. Hey, no, that's not true. Let's tell you how.
Are you saying off the
ledge? Off the ledge. If I can say that. Talk them off the ledge.
I just wanted to get the true picture.
Yes. Yeah. Especially when they walk in too. People are just very scared of the whole process. They just don't, the fear of the unknown, if you may.
Yes.
And it's always good to kind of walk them through, hey, this is what the law has for you. This is the protections you have within the law. You don't lose anything. This is how it could actually improve your financial and overall life.
Right. Do you know, actually, bankruptcy, to me, I'm just talking out loud here, when you're financially really in a bad space,
Yes.
to find out there is something that can help you get out of that bad space, that then gives you a clean slate, a fresh start, and there's no strings attached, right? I mean, there's a healing process for the credit, and you have to rebuild. But that's just pretty amazing, because people can walk away from hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's exactly what I'm saying. It's something that people just are shocked by. Wow, this is a solution that could help. I've been on this round around ball for maybe 7-8 years, trying to kind of make ends meet, trying to break out of the cycle, and I just have not been able to do it. So when you have bankruptcy, it gives you that relief that you've been looking for and seeking for all this time. Go ahead.
What type of...
Okay. We do this all the time.
1, 2, 3, let's go.
Let's go with the flow.
What type of debt do you find is most often a part of bankruptcy? I guess the largest thing, the main thing that catapults a person into that space.
Well, it's just all around. Medical bills are a big one. Credit cards are very big because, you know, they just kind of get run away from you. People lose a handle on those. And then it could really also be things like your mortgage or your car payment. You get into a bad car loan and the car is breaking down and you don't know what your options are with the car breaking down, and also trying to get to work and do all that and pay for the expenses related to it, as well as paying for the car. So the scope is just all over. I mean, it just depends on where somebody is. Yeah.
So Flora, how often do you hear these words? I am a Christian and I know this couldn't be the right thing to do. How often do you hear that?
Very often. I know this is an area that Christians really, really struggle with, and that's why I'm always happy when they walk into my office.
That they're Christians or?
No, because it's a way to provide them relief that they didn't know was in there. I always take them right back to the Bible.
Okay.
And it's actually, if you want to pull it up, it's in Deuteronomy 5, 1, 2, 3. The Bible actually talks about it. What people don't realize is bankruptcy is right in the Bible. In fact, the bankruptcy laws in the United States tailored right from the Bible every 7 years. It changed in 2005 to every 8 years, but it was exactly as the Bible put it in there, every 7 years, the year of release.
Wow. Okay.
I'll read the verse real
Please
quick, if you don't mind. At the end of every 7 years, thou shalt make a release, and this is the manner of release. Every creditor that lended ought unto his neighbor shall release it. He shall not exact it to his neighbor or his brother, because it is called the Lord's release. That's exactly what bankruptcy is.
Write that down, Lord's release. I love it too. And I'm sure that is very, very, very helpful. I really want to write that down because I'll make it something else.
Yes.
So let's talk about, I think you're kind of covering when you may have to file bankruptcy, but just kind of go through the difference between what type of bankruptcies are available.
Good question.
Just how we maneuver through them.
Sure. So let's talk about the personal ones, the most common ones that usually we have to deal with in our daily lives. Those are the Chapter 7 and the Chapter 13. A Chapter 7 are for people with, income, a bankruptcy tailor is based on your income. A 13 is affordable for people who can pay part of the debt, but not all of it. Maybe they can pay so much of it. They can make a payment to a creditor each month. They just can't pay what the creditors are asking them to pay. A 7 is the complete discharge. It's basically you're at a place where you just cannot pay anything. And I'll get more to it as we get into it.
Okay.
So basically, a clear picture of how I explain it to people. You come in, so let's say you have $1,000 worth of income. Your expenses each month are $1,000. When you pay your mortgage, your rent, your whatever, there's nothing left over to pay your creditors. And your income is low where there's just nothing you can do to pay these creditors. We put you in a Chapter 7. Now, there are statutory limits to who can file what based on income. I think right now for Chapter 7, that's $54,000. So it's pretty high, where the person can still qualify for 7 so long as, you qualify income-wise and there are no assets that you can even use where there's equity in the assets over a certain amount, you qualify for 7. A 13 basically says, let's say I'm making $2,000 a month, for example. I have about $1,800 worth of expenses. I do have $200 left over to pay these creditors. I just don't have enough to pay everybody. So, Visa's here wanted $200, MasterCard's want $400, American Express wants $600. Total of that is about $1,000 or so. I only have $200. What do I do? The court says it's okay. Give us the $200. We will pay those to your creditors on a pro rata basis, and whatever is not paid off, we'll discharge for you. So at least you feel like you're doing something when you can. If you can, they want you to do something. But if you can't, then you get the discharge on a 7 and move on with your life.
I love it.
So question.
Yes.
Do you help the customers make that decision of the difference? Is one, I was going to say, is one not better than the other? Or is it just because of how the customer feels or what you feel is best for them?
Well, it's really depending on their financial state.
Okay.
So we do help the client as the attorney make that decision because we look at things about assets, you know, like if you're filing bankruptcy in the state of Indiana, you have certain exemptions that we qualify. So even if you have a house and has equity in it, but the equity is under a certain amount. So let's say it's $20,000. Well, you can keep your house and still be able to get a discharge. But let's say we're looking at about $200,000 in equity. Well, yes, there's more equity, more than the exemption amount. So the court says, well, we think you have enough assets to pay something.
I
so
see.
then a person like that, we put in a 13.
I see.
Or in some cases, it may be that they're trying to save the house that they're behind on. Then a 13 may be the option because, you know, yes, I was working, everything was good, I was current on my mortgage, but I lost my job or I got sick for a little bit and I couldn't pay the mortgage for 6 months. Now I'm in foreclosure. What are my options? Well, we put you in a bankruptcy to try to catch up because maybe now you're making money. You can pay your ongoing mortgage payment. In fact, you can not only pay that, but you can pay a little bit more to catch up where you fell behind. It's just the creditor wants $10,000. You don't have it. The court gives you about 5 years to pay that in a Chapter 13.
That's
So-
awesome. So the court intercedes and helps you work out a plan.
Yes.
And then the creditor has to go along with the plan.
That's
Is that
exactly
correct?
right. So
Okay.
with your attorney, you create a Chapter 13 plan that's
Okay.
acceptable and feasible to pay your debt and also affordable for where you can live and breathe and you can have emergencies because nobody knows tomorrow. But the court cares about your personal everyday expenses, whereas if you work with a credit counseling agency or so, they don't care. They're just trying to negotiate with your creditors. Now, filing a bankruptcy gives you that protection where the creditor has to accept the plan the court puts forward.
Excellent.
I have two questions.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember. Okay, this is one question. What happens when you're a married couple? Do you
Yes.
both have to file bankruptcy?
Good question. Not necessarily. It just depends on the amount of debt. So if the debt is mostly in one person's name and the other person is not part of the debt, there's no reason for them to file. Remember that each individual, when you were born, you get a social security number.
Correct.
Yes.
Marriage does not tie that together. So for that reason, a husband can file, a wife does not have to file, and they can still protect whatever things that they have. And we'll get more into that in detail.
Oh,
Is
wow.
that Indiana or is that federal? Is
That's
that,
federal.
That's
That's
across
everywhere.
the country.
Yeah, that's
okay,
across the
good
country.
job.
That's
Okay,
correct.
great.
Great.
Well, just to piggyback on this conversation a little bit about bankruptcies, I want to talk about bankruptcies and buying a home.
Okay.
Because you still have to live. You still have to live. And that's what's important to really remember. So, a couple of things. Good news. With the Chapter 7, which is that clean slate Flora talked about, what's required there is that you reestablish your credit. The bankruptcy has to be discharged for 2 years. And then HUD will allow you to qualify for a mortgage. You're not penalized because you had a bankruptcy in your past. So we ask about the bankruptcy, but we're not going to say, hey, this person had a bankruptcy in their past, so we're increasing the rate another percent. That does not happen. Main thing is that you have this clean slate now and you want to pay on time. Best way to rebuild your credit is to open up 1 or 2 credit cards. $300 limits are fine. Charge $10 a month. Pay the bill once pay the payment once the bill comes in, not before. So you'll be amazed at what that will do for your credit score. So that's the 7. So 24 months, guys. We know. Just think back 24 months ago. 24
Yeah.
months goes by just like that.
Just like that.
Okay.
Correct.
When it comes to the 13, however, the 13. Remember, this is a workout plan. You're still doing life. You're still working. You just have the court now involved in helping you get your debts paid. So with that situation, all that HUD requires is that you be in the plan for at least 1 year. So this plan is not discharged. You are in this plan. You're in the plan. You've been in the plan for 1 year. You've made your payments on time. That is not an issue. You still have to qualify for a mortgage. So we're still going to be looking for you reestablishing credit so that you can have a decent credit score. Okay? But the court has to approve the purchase. I have never had them deny a purchase. They too know you have to live somewhere, so the court has to approve the purchase. That in the past has been like a 2-week, 3-week process, and that may change, but I'm just sharing with you that home ownership is very much still accomplishable, achievable if you've had a 7 or if you're in a 13.
So when you're in the 13 and you have been approved to buy another home, but you are still going to be in that Chapter 13, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
And the
Yes.
payment for the 13 is going to be part of your debt ratio analysis.
Gotcha.
And just to tell you just to pick back what you just said, people don't, I do this all the time within the bankruptcy. All we have to do is file a motion to incur debt. And we just
Okay.
explain to the court, hey, the person is paying, $1,400 in rent. If they get a house, it'd be about $1,200. It'll be much cheaper. They get to have a better way of life, or even sometimes the amount is more. So long as you can afford it, the court wants you, the bankruptcy is there to help you build your financial life and kind of start over. So they're encouraging this. So a home ownership is something that's key that the courts encourage. So long as it's reasonable, we file the motion, and then the trustee, who kind of is in charge of the creditors, is monitoring to see if they have an objection. The objection period for that is about 21 days. But sometimes we'll call up the trustee and say, hey, do you have an objection? We really want this house. Can you hurry up and file a notice of no objection so we can get this home closed quickly?
Great.
So that's an
and they
option.
work with
They
you.
generally do, yes.
That's
yes,
awesome.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I mean, I think in the Southern District of Indiana, we have some great trustees.
That's great.
Very helpful.
That's great.
Good to know.
Any complaints, yeah.
Another question. So in the Chapter 7, so I'm right now, as we know, having some issues, having some concerns. However, I still want to keep my house. I still want to keep my car. So what do I do? Share with us the process for that.
So if you are current on your house,
Okay.
and you have paid every payment, and you're not behind on it, you
Okay.
can still file a bankruptcy and keep your house. In fact, the only reason is if you're more than a month behind on your house, or you're farther behind and you're trying to catch up, that's exactly why we would put you in a 13, just so you'll be able to keep it. But in a 7, if you're current on the house, you file a bankruptcy, we sign something called a reaffirmation agreement. Basically what that means is, I know that the bankruptcy lets me walk away from these debts.
Right.
But on this item, on this house, or on this car, I want to keep paying on it as if I'd never filed bankruptcy. So basically, I want to continue making my payment. Now, the reaffirmation agreement is key because if you file that and it's filed properly, the creditor can continue after the bankruptcy to report that on your credit. So that helps build your credit post-bankruptcy too. Same thing with the car. That helps build your credit post-bankruptcy. Signing that reaffirmation agreement is key if you want to do that. Now, let's say you don't want to, sign a reaffirmation agreement. You don't lose anything by not signing one. Some creditors are making a big deal because that's, a liability they take on if they don't sign one.
Okay.
You basically are not reaffirming the debt, which means you can still kind of walk away from it. So a lot of creditors push for us to sign that if the person wants to keep that item, like the house or the car.
I think I lost you
Okay.
right before you started the other situation. Now okay, especially on the credit report.
Sure.
I guess I didn't realize that if we reaffirm,
Yes.
that it can still be on your credit report as far as how they report. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
Yes. So if you reaffirm a debt,
Yes.
basically all you're saying is, I'm going to continue to pay this debt.
Yes.
As if I'd never filed bankruptcy.
Okay.
Basically, right? And so after the bankruptcy, you're making your payment.
Yes.
The creditor is free to report that the payments are being made. And what does that do? It increases your credit.
I get
So
you.
if you're finding a way to build your credit, reaffirming things like your house, if you want to still keep it, you're current
Sure.
on it. Maybe you had problems with credit cards, but the house you were able to keep
Sure.
and keep making payments on. Well, that's going to help you show a good credit. It's going to continue to build your credit. Now, at the same time, you reaffirm and you start getting delinquent, it still reports on your credit because the reaffirmation agreement you signed and was properly filed with the court shows that I'm reaffirming this debt as if I'd never
You're
filed
basically
bankruptcy.
re-obligating yourself.
You're re-obligating yourself to the debt.
Legally re-obligating,
Okay.
because through the bankruptcy, the debt, if it's discharged in the bankruptcy, then you are legally no longer obligated.
Right.
And so that's why it can't be on the credit report, because then that's like the creditor is saying, hey, you owe it, and they cannot
come
do
back.
that.
They can. That's what
Right.
bankruptcy protection does for you.
Yeah.
They can't come after you.
All righty then.
Awesome. Oh my
Actually, I don't think I knew that they can still report after you reaffirm.
Because you've
That's
reobligated.
fantastic. I think that's
you've reobligated.
fantastic.
Yeah, that's the point of people stressing a reaffirmation.
Yeah.
agreement.
Yes.
In fact, sometimes
Yes.
clients call me and say, "Well, I didn't see it on the credit." It's because you didn't reaffirm on the debt. If you don't reaffirm, that's the only loss you suffer is you don't have that opportunity to have the creditor go back and start reporting. Now, some creditors are not good about this. They don't report anyway, but most of the time, a reaffirmation agreement prompts them to do that to build back your credit.
So Diana, both of you have this, so you would know also.
Okay.
This question about how long the bankruptcy stays on the credit report. I know she made a comment, the time frame has come from 6 to 8 years, you said, is that correct?
To report on your credit, is that what you're asking? Or
How long will it stay
How long
on the
will it
credit
stay on the
report?
credit report?
I think I always tell people 7 to 10 years because every credit agency is different. It's about that, and they keep changing all the time, but it's about 7 to 10 years.
And that is correct. It is 7 years from the date you file a 13.
Okay.
So from the date you file a 13. So if your 13 repayment plan is 5 years, then in 2 after you are discharged, it's going to drop off in 2. Okay, and then the 7 is 10 years.
Okay.
Yep. And the older it gets, though, for credit purposes, for qualifying purposes, for credit score purposes, the older that bankruptcy becomes, the less impact it has on the credit score.
And I'm glad you mentioned that
Great.
because people are always worried. I don't
Yes.
want it on my I don't want it on my credit report.
Right.
It means I can't get a car. It means I
Yeah.
can't get a house. That's not true, actually. Bankruptcy actually cleans it up versus
That is true.
carrying out a delinquent debt. People don't understand
Keep
that.
your head up high.
They
Yeah,
come
yeah.
in with the delinquent debt. It's been sitting on the credit for. I'm like, well, the bad debt sits on your credit even longer.
That's
because,
right.
they can collect for however long, 8, 10 years, and then they can file a judgment, and then now that sits on your credit for a while. Whereas bankruptcy just cleans it and tells everybody, hey, this person is debt free.
That's right. That's right.
That's a lot better. on your
Garnishments
credit.
and the whole. I mean, I've had people say, Diana, I want to buy a house, but I'm struggling with my debts and I don't know if I should file bankruptcy. And true story, one I've mentioned often because it just was so encouraging for this young lady. She had went through a divorce and through this divorce, she had signed for a lot of the things she and her husband had acquired. So through this divorce, while he ended up responsible for some debts, he didn't pay them. Well, they were in her name. And so she was one of those that's like, I'm a Christian and I just feel really bad about it. And so we just kind of figured up her debt, the amount she owed. Let's say it was $30,000. And she might have made $30,000 gross, right? I said, how long is it going to take you to pay this off, really?
Right, right.
And
Look at the big
Look
picture.
at the big picture. And I said, I'm not telling you to file bankruptcy, just chat with the bankruptcy attorney. And so she did. She's a single mom. She filed, and 24 months later, she stayed in contact with me. We rebuilt her credit. 24 months later, she got her house. She applied for her pre-approval and bought her house.
Fantastic.
Yes, that happens a lot because, I also practice family law. And so you have a divorce court saying, husband, you're responsible for A debt, wife, you're responsible for B.
Yes.
Well, what happens is when they sign things jointly, a family court in Indiana can decide, okay, husband, you're responsible for these debts and wife this debt. But here's what happens. A family law court in Indiana cannot tell a federal, American Express, you got to take the husband's name or the wife's name off the debt.
Right.
So then they can end up with a lot of debts. That's sometimes, I say bankruptcy is just a series of things that happen in life. What happens when they're stuck? Well, bankruptcy can help take care of some of those debts. And that helps the person get a new start to begin their life over. All the time, even if you go through a foreclosure, you file a bankruptcy, you can get a new house again,
right.
you can get a new car.
Yes.
6 months after bankruptcy, most people get offers for cars that they didn't think were even possible. 6 months out.
Right.
I always get the calls. I say, wait, 6 months.
Right.
I promise you'll
Yes.
get offers for credit cards, for cars. Just be careful not to get overwhelmed.
That's
Yes.
right.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes, yes,
Exactly. Yes. Well, it sounds like you navigate your folks through the process
Yes, ma'am.
from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
And do they call you after the bankruptcy's discharged?
Sometimes, yes, people call, and it's just a different. When they come into the office, they're so overwhelmed because
Sure.
everybody has to deal with finances. Everybody has to deal with, I mean, that's just the kind of society we have, debt. And it can get so overwhelming.
Right.
And they just come in heavy. And it's just good when you can say, it's okay. This is a process where you can lighten your load. And guess what? God created it.
That's
the Lord's
right.
release,
That's
like we
right.
talked about
Absolutely.
earlier.
Lord's release.
And that's always a helpful thing.
Now, this is a question that I have. It just boggled my mind.
Yes.
At the time that this happened, I had listed a house. We did sell it, and make a long story short, she did share with me. No, she didn't share with me that she had filed bankruptcy, which was neither here nor there. So we thought.
Yes.
But there was these judgments, numerous judgments, maybe 5, 6. Maybe more so. What was interesting is she did share with me, I've got some other debts that I need to pay off. Well, it was actually in the bankruptcy. We found out that these debts were in the bankruptcy. However, why did she have to still pay those off?
Well, so she may not have had to pay that off. Let me explain. There is something called a motion to avoid a judgment lien.
Okay.
So in the state of Indiana, you get a lawsuit, they get a judgment in the same county where you reside and own a home. That judgment automatically attaches to the home, or the creditor may even take the steps to attach it to the home, so it becomes a second, third, fourth mortgage. When you do file a bankruptcy, the law lets you protect the equity in your house up to the amount of equity up to a certain amount. So let's say, I think now it's about $20,000.
Okay.
So let's say the house is worth $150,000.
Yes.
Let's say that's the value of the house. And you only owe $130,000, which means you have $20,000 in equity.
Okay.
Well, and then you have these judgment liens, $2,000, $4,000, $5,000. Well, as you see, that's within the exemption amount the law protects. Well, how can I get rid of those in a bankruptcy? I'm filing bankruptcy, but I have to take the extra step to avoid that judgment lien off the home, because it's almost like you're stripping a mortgage. Because remember, it goes in as a judgment lien, it becomes a second or third mortgage. You've
Yes,
got
it
to
does.
strip it off the
Correct,
home.
correct.
So, but the person has to do that while the case is pending. So most people file bankruptcy, they don't even tell us, oh, this was a judgment or it's just a debt. They don't realize or didn't know that it was a debt that had attached to their home, or they'd been sued and they'd received a judgment. So in that case, if we know, we tell them, hey, you have to, go through this extra step to strip it. Well, what happens 5 years down the road? They're at the closing table and they realize, oh, I have these debts. Can I go back? Yes. People don't realize that. You can actually go back, reopen the 5-year-old bankruptcy and strip that mortgage so you don't have to pay it, because the debt is gone. You're just taking the mortgage debt lien off.
What a wonderful way to
Listen, I
to
was going to say.
end the show.
Well, and Flora, clearly you are masterful at what you do.
Absolutely.
So you are truly the professional. We want you to give our viewers your contact information.
Okay.
Real quickly.
My phone number is 317-210-0342. The email address is Flora, Flora, at owolabi.law.com.
Very good. Thank you
can reach
so
me
much.
there. Thank you.
And we are Diana and Janice with the Home and Finance Show. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
For tuning in today.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
ladies, for having me.
You're welcome.